Welcome to part two of Rabbi Tamima Itzkovitz's presentation about Jewish customs in burial. But more than that, we'll be looking at how you lead up to the moment of death and how you come out of the moment of death, both for the mourners and for the soul of the departed. So there's lots that we're going to look at today. And this is the Jewish community of Sedona and the Verde Valley, and we're so glad to see you as a guest lecturer today. We'll have time to discuss, to add our own ideas and questions as we go along. So I'll turn it over to you, Rabbi Tamima. Welcome again, and I know you'll be sharing your screen with some wonderful material.
Well, I'm glad to be back with the beautiful community today. I want to mention there were a couple questions, a couple of handouts people were asking for last time. So there are links in the chat box to handouts. One is for the 8-step prostration. Someone asked about dying and taking like a practice of active dying. And this is a practice of prostration that it's done on weekdays. And the final step is there. They add, if you were to transition right now, you'd go direct without waiting the 7 days. Now, you can argue it might be good to stay the 7 days. I don't know. I haven't been there. And it's a direct connection. So it's a way to open the channels for that. So if you want to look at that, it's the first link. And the second link are verses from Sefer Maavor Yabbok. I mentioned the 112 verses that when someone's really in the process, the throes of dying, and if they haven't passed yet, there's another set of prayers that are said, and these prayers are not unique. I think it's like Jewish greatest hits. Great Jewish spiritual davening is really what these are. So when you see them, they're good ones to know, like Psalm 91, which is a psalm against evil spirits for protection. Reb Zalman used to teach that, and you see that in different places. The Ana B'Choach, which is also broken down in detail in the book that Diane and I were just talking about, 7 Sacred Circles, the Kabbalah behind it, basically moving through one of the realms with each circle. And there's also a practice of doing that around a meta or a mate, a deceased. Are there any questions lingering from last time before we get started?
When you spoke, you talked about environment and burial. What about people with artificial limbs? And also, because so many people have had knee replacements and they're titanium or hip replacements. How does that work?
That's a really good question. I haven't heard of anyone doing anything differently for people that have artificial limbs or have implants. Metal, it's still natural, so it's okay for the earth. I'd imagine there'd be some plastic, but we do the best we can with what we have, is my sense, and we don't have to we don't want to add stress. It's really like to simplify. And if it's going to add stress like that, I don't think it's really, maybe some people would want to go and see about getting those parts removed, but I think it would just be too stressful for the family, for anybody involved. It's like, just let the people be as they are. Life is good. We do the best we can. It's not perfect. Who here is perfect? I got fillings, and we all have some things that are not. And God willing, wouldn't it be nice that as we move further with the medical environment, that we learn to put holistic items into our bodies? That would be the prayer that would come for that. Things that are natural into our bodies, and that we have the merit to be able to find matter of that nature that's useful for that.
So, Rabbi, I'd like to say that what I got the most impact from your first lesson was the idea of equality in status and avoiding any embarrassment, to allow for the mitzvah of comforting the mourners and not anybody having any shame. and I happened to reread the flyer about the lesson. And when I read equality there, it just felt so different. I think that was such an amazing concept of equality in humankind, not equality between the sexes or necessarily equality between the rich and the poor, but just humanity itself. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you. That just rings so true. I get chills just hearing you say it. So thank you for that. It's just
My
more, we're simple, we're beings, right? We're all humans and we all deserve to be honored.
And are you going to touch on resurrection and people wanting to be buried at Mount Olive so that they would be closer?
Well, I wasn't going to touch on that today, but we can talk about that at the end. If there's time, I'm open to it. Certainly.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So let's call in the angels from Psalm 91. It's always appropriate. It's appropriate when someone needs help. It's appropriate when we want our angels, because I think we want our angels around a lot of times because they help us even when we don't know it. And it goes like this. Ki malachav yetza ve'elach lishmarcha b'chol drachecha. Please join me. Ki malachav yetza ve'elach lishmarcha b'chol drachecha. 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 Amen. For their angels, for God's angels, have been commanded to guard you on all your paths. Now, and even more so when the transition comes. Okay, Sefer Maavor Yabbok. We've talked about this a little bit. So one of the things when I first took a look at this book and it came, in the mail, and it was like this big Kabbalistic book. I had no idea what was in it. I didn't really know the author. Like when you work with a book for after a while, you kind of get to know the author and it becomes easier to understand. But what really, really impressed me was just that there was Bikkur Cholim, visiting the ill. And then just like the next pages after that, it was Vidui, the confession. Then right after that, there are verses for the transition, 8 Yetziat Neshama, for the moments that the transition, when the soul is leaving the body. And just to see that in print in Hebrew was just a big wow. It really acknowledged the soul in a way. And then after that happened, it was the Taharah, which is the rechitza, the washing. As I mentioned before, the Taharah is the final mikvah. And like before we mikvah, we wash. So there's a final washing, then the Taharah, the pouring. Well, it's done in different ways. Like most people are familiar with pouring. At least that's what people tend to do in the Western United States. Although there are places that have mikvahs where they do a whole complete immersion. Then after that, the dressing, the laying in the casket, hakafot around the meta or the met, and the Levayah. So it goes through, and it's like just a few pages. It's not like it's a new chapter, and like this. It doesn't look like there's any pause between any of the pieces, but it really gives a sense that these are the people that are caring for this human being. If you do Bikkur Cholim, you visit them. If they get better, great. I'll come visit you again. In a couple days anyway. Or or they die, and it's like, well, you're there on the vigil, being with them, staying with them, staying for the duration. And it's not like I mentioned, when my mother died, it was like, oh, the living part she wasn't going to be living anymore, so boom, nobody was there anymore. And that was just so problematic. So this is the earliest and most respected work of end of life, major Kabbalah. And I think I just kind of went through this. It's a holistic care where it's just continuous. And for me, that was really important. Something else about Yabbok, I think I touched on this the other day, where it's the word itself and the reference itself is so beautiful. It's when Yaakov got his enlightenment, and so he did a transition of his own, although it wasn't into the next world, right? It's Yichud, Yud, for unification, Bracha, blessing, and what happens after you unify. Yichud is like unification, and what it means is like just, and we can all do this, so it's not like something out there so hard. Take your mind and just like connect it, or set your intention to connecting it with the divine mind, whatever that means for you right now. Right, and then you do a bracha, you do an invocation, and when that happens, there's holiness follows, kedusha. Yabbok. Okay, so the first part that we're going to talk about is Bikkur Cholim, visiting the ill. Whoops.
I remember from my nursing studies that the last thing that goes is hearing. So even if somebody doesn't look like they're alert or awake or they're unconscious, they are still able to hear.
Thank you. Nice. Anything else on Bikkur Cholim? So when someone's getting ready to transition, it is really wonderful to support them in passing in the middle of words of Torah. Hasugula haniflahi. This is a wonderful, like a sigula is something it's like, it could be something physical like an amulet, and but it's really a way to connect and to elevate. So this wonderful way of elevation is for someone, someone will rise up on high from within Pesuke Derachame, words of compassion, words of maternal mercy, and if they merit to do so, and to go and to pass away from chatting about Torah, just like we do when we're alive, as we're passing, and it could be, and there's different aspects of Torah. So whatever Torah resonates with that particular person, and Torah can be used loosely in this way, and by these means, this will be like a prayer for the person in their life, so that they actually, that they're going to have this when they pass on to the other side, because they're leaving from like Torah study, from a place of intellect, a place of love, a place of awe, and of awe for the divine. Because really, when you study Torah, it's just like, God is so amazing, and how do we get a sense of what the presence of what God is, and just to pass with that sense of awe is really it's a mamish, a really high level. So if it looks like someone's going to pass away, there's a vidui, the final rites. And this is the confessional. And also, like, as I go through this, I come back and I think about Yom Kippur, which you could say is really a day when we practice. Was it the lady with the R name? I think I saw your name here, but I don't think Ria. I think we were talking about that last time. But like, so Yom Kippur is also a day when we are practicing active dying, because we do 5 confessions each day, we wear white, we don't eat, and you'll see a lot of the ritual that we do here for end of life references or is similar to what we do on Yom Kippur. So here we have people, it looks like it's a minyan. And in our circles, we would have women and men sitting together. So these are still lovely, and I miss the women in the circle, just saying. And so really either listening to the final confession, or sometimes if the person's fallen and they're not able to do the confession themselves, we can do it on their behalf.
There's something beautiful that you should notice. The goses, that's the word for the person who is dying, is counted as the 10th. Counted as the 10th. And that's a way of honoring and equalizing as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's like also being counted to the last moment. Yeah, I just think of that transition. It almost makes me want to cry. It's like, oh, now, and then there were 9. Here's a sample confessional. It's a contemporary creative one, and it hits the notes of the traditional one. So I want to read this, and you can either read it with me or close your eyes and let it just wash over you. I acknowledge before the source of all that life and death are not in my hands. Just as I did not choose to be born, so I do not choose to die. May it come to pass that I be healed, but if death is my fate, then I accept it with dignity and the loving calm of one who knows the way of all things. May my death be honorable, and may my life be a healing memory for those who know me. May my loved ones think well of me, and may my memory bring them joy. From all those I may have hurt, I ask forgiveness, and upon all who have hurt me, I give forgiveness. As a wave returns to the ocean, so I return to the source from which I came. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, that which we call God is oneness itself. Blessed is the way of God, the way of life and death, of coming and going, of meeting and loving, now and forever. As I was blessed with the one, so now I am blessed with the other. Shalom, shalom, shalom.
Tamima, that was so beautiful. And I need to add that at this very moment, I was notified of the death of Gerda Weissman Klein.
What?
She was a Holocaust survivor. She got an Emmy Award and an Academy Award, and she got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She wrote the book All But My Life. And she was very, very active in the community in Phoenix, speaking about the Holocaust from her point of view as a survivor. And it's just so amazing that I just got the notification as you were reading that.
I wanted to say I've heard her speak at my sisterhoods in New Jersey, and just an amazing woman. But when Jenny and I think it was Diane Greenblatt went down to the Historical Museum in Phoenix, she's from that community, and they said she wasn't able to do any presentations anymore, but her books and her story are just so amazing. It's something that when you hear them, you can never forget.
Baruch Dayan Ha'anet.
Amen.
They say blessed. God, only God knows when it's time to go. We sure don't. It sounds like her memory is already a blessing. Say her name?
Very much so. Gerda Weissman Klein.
Gerda Weissman Klein. May your neshama soar freely, unobstructed. May you advocate for us on high
She,
and bring blessing.
she actually married the American soldier who rescued her during the Holocaust, and they were quite a very active couple, always doing something for others.
So I want to bring this in again because it's so human. I think we looked at this the other day. But just to emphasize, like I remember being as a kid and it's like, oh, you can't be here. You should go. Just go. Get out of here. This is no place for you. And it wasn't even the room where someone was dying. I don't even know why, but it felt like that at least when I was a kid a lot. It was probably the generation that I grew up in. But just a reminder that the custom to get the relatives out of the room of the one dying is specifically not to stress the person that's dying out by raising voice. But if you can possibly stand, if they can possibly stand their ground without raising their voice, there is no doubt that there is tremendous pleasure to the one who is passing away to have their close living ones there with them at the time.
Isn't it also true, however, that in many cases, someone who is hanging on chooses that one moment when their loved one stepped out of the room to make their passing, so as maybe not to bring them more grief?
Oh, that happens too. That happened with my mother. And if someone's delaying, it's okay to leave them for the moment. But even if if you leave the room and that's when they decide to leave, or I don't know, probably, I think there's some of their decisions in there as well. It doesn't, still having been there in general, and everybody's an individual, but I think as a general rule, to have someone to be there for that key moment. I guess this is something that means a lot to me because I wasn't there, and I had the feeling at the time that it wasn't okay to be there, but it was a different life then. I was very young. So I just want everybody to know that it's okay.
I just remember several cases when I was in nursing school where several patients, when I was working during the summers, would wait until somebody was in their room so they wouldn't be alone when they died. Even if it wasn't family, if it was me as a nurse coming in, it was somebody there and they would wait. And it's also a striking feeling that, you ease their pain as they were dying, that they weren't alone.
I think
and I think it depends also on the person. Just it's as in so many circumstances in life. I think some people probably find it easier to transition when they don't feel the pulls of people trying to keep them, here.
I think it is individual. I think people tend to leave too early though within our society because people are so afraid of death or just to be present for it. So I guess the message I would leave with would be err on the side of being present, and it's okay to leave. If you go to the bathroom and the person dies, well then that was clearly their choice to do that on their own. My mother would have wanted to be alone. That's just how she was, we're all wired differently. We're all unique beings. Okay, good. So here is the tree of life. It's so funny. The first time I saw this picture, it was like a vertical tree. Then I started doing more end-of-life work, and I see this as a person on a Taharah table. So what I want to mention here is the 112 verses to support crossing over the Yabbok River. And the 112 has to do with with three names on the center line, which is the name for Keter. Now I can point, which is it's the center line, the Keter, which is crown, which is the interface between the finite and the infinite. So as I point to this, and I'm talking about, this is a microcosm, we're all little microcosms of the divine macrocosm. So on the divine macrocosm, I should say, that's the interface between the finite and the infinite. and we all have our little microcosm that mirrors that models that. And the name for that is Ehyeh, Aleph He Yud He, gematria of 21. Here is the heart center, Tiferet. It's the seat of balance, of harmony. The divine name for that is one most of us are familiar with, Yud He Vav He, and with the gematria of 26. And here on the bottom of the center line, it's Malchut, which is king, sovereignty. Being sovereign. And it's like I hold Shekhinah, the presence there with that. And the name for that is Adonai, which is 65. So if you add the gematria of the divine name, Adonai, 65, 26 for Tiferet, which is Yud He Vav He, and 21 for Ehyeh, I hope it still gives you 112. It has every other time I added it up. And 112 is the numerology of Yabbok, Yud Bet Kuf. Yud is 10, Bet is 2, Kuf is 100. So in this way, like numerically and energetically, we're building a channel for the transition, direct transition for the person, the goses or the goseset, the person that's dying. And so that explains a little bit about how that works. Okay, and there's a prescription here to help the transition. So, and if the passing is slow, v'im yachir milfad meets te'er chas v'shalom, if it's taking a long time for someone to pass away, and they're getting stressed out, it's really stressful. So I guess if it's not stressful, it's not such a big issue, is what this tells you. Then you say 7 times Psalm 91, which we'll look at in a moment, which is Psalm 91 with the Ana B'choach, and which is a psalm that's right before L'cha Dodi and Kabbalat Shabbat, and Shir Hamalot, Psalm 121, with a whole bunch of different psukim verses for compassion. And you do it anyway, Keratzon HaMesader, as the person that's leading wants to do. So when I see these words, Keratzon HaMesader, it tells me that it's like rifting and it's appropriate, and I can't think of anything more holy, really, just to be there singing, holding it, and getting and allowing, instead of having to go outside, but being driven from the inside, which is way more potent. And then it says here, and have a kavanah in the verse, Ki melechav yitzeh elach, the one that we've been singing, and to say that 7 times. Each and every time you do the entire psalm, you say that verse 7 times, and at the end of saying it, when you want to help somebody transition, this is how it's different from what we're doing. We say betov talin v'takitz, so it's like rest well and awaken. So it's actually planting the seed for the next life. And then you add on the Levayah, the funeral. Levayah is like the accompanying. I mean, I love that name for a funeral. It's not a funeral. It's we're just taking you to your next resting spot. Come on, let's go. And it has a certain lighter, continuous resonance to it.
Beautiful. And for those of you who come to Morning Minyan, you'll remember that we have the part of the things you should do without keeping score, and Levayah Met is one of them, accompanying the dead. So that's one of the mitzvahs that we should do, that we read every time we come to Minyan. And I invite all of you to come Wednesday morning, 8:30, and you'll hear that phrase.
Nice. And also, all those that list that we read, if you look at the second, in the chat box, the second link will give you a list, and you'll be able to view all these. And if you need it, it's also appropriate for healing, the same verses, and so because I use them all the time for different reasons. Okay, so it doesn't have to be, those verses are not just said for the transition, and together they're said for the transition. So this is Psalm 91, which we could read together, but I think I'm a little bit worried about time. There's so much to cover, and you can probably read it on your own. You've probably seen Psalm 91. It's done at night. It's done for Hanukkah when it's the dark of the year, and like the human consciousness is worried about, are you going to get sunshine again? And so it's said as part of the Hanukkah ritual, at least some of the Hanukkah ritual I love to do for that reason. It really adds protection against negative entities. So after death, the meta or mate is moved to the floor. So they have them wrapped up here. And on the floor, especially, it's maybe, and these days people use a refrigerator. If the floor was the cold place, and the place where the coolest place in the room was always the floor because heat rises. And that's really a large part of why that's done. And it's respectful. It's kavod hamet to make sure the body doesn't decompose, before, and until it's in the earth. So that's a piece of that. And there's also, anyhow, so to the ground. We'll see what the next picture is. The next part is rechitza, the washing. So this is like washing the body before the final mikveh, you clean behind the fingernails, you wash the face, you wash the hair. Oh my God, washing hair was probably the most impactful part of the Taharah for me, because like you wash the hair, you put the suds on it and fuzz it up and rinse it out, and then afterwards, the countenance of the face changed every time, in my experience. You try it and you let me know, but every time that the hair was washed, it was really a profound shift, so much so that I really carried it with me, and I wondered what that was about.
Notice that not everybody is actively involved in the washing. It's just as important for the people who are reading, who are even turned away, or who are outside. And I know what people supported me when my mother passed away. I was not going to do the washing. It's not even appropriate for a child to do it unless there's not enough people, but it's just too overcoming. And so I was in the corner, and a friend was reading with me, and I was turned away. I was giving directions also because I am the rabbi, but I was not involved in the washing. And it's really important, even in this Prague postcard picture, to show that there are different people preparing the shroud on the other side of the room, reading outside. Everyone's doing something that is appropriate for them to do that's helpful.
And that's a really good point, Alicia, that you bring up here, because if in a Chevra Kadisha, washing is only one of the jobs that needs to be done. There's phone calls, there's, organizing like that. It's like ordering the tachrichim. Some chevras sew their own tachrichim, for the community, and they get together and they have a sewing circle, and it's also a way to build community where they are together. When a community gets together, the first thing they do, a Jewish community, is start a Chevra Kadisha. It's not start the synagogue, it's not anything else, but it's really because you never know when someone's going to pass. If someone's going to be born, you get some time to plan for it. But the passing part, the first thing, the most important aspect is to be able to care for our dead. One of the most beautiful aspects about this, we kind of talked about the Eitz Chaim. So this is a picture of the tree of life, the masculine model, the feminine model, and the picture that we looked at before, to be able to, you can kind of see how this and this are the same picture, just a different perspective. And this is the feminine tree of life. Who here has seen a feminine tree of life before? Not many people have. So I'm here to tell you about it. Circle within circles. So just like a tree, if you see this as a tree or this as a tree, this is a cross section of the tree. If we think of our bodies as the tree of life, this would be a cross section, and this would be different kinds of tissue bone or fat and sinews is a way to understand that. So when we wash the body, we praise the body, and there's a certain way of, when I say a certain way, I've had the privilege of being able to see and hold the body, which may externally not look so great, but then you think of the life lived, you think about children, grandchildren, students, whatever the person's life, and how beautiful their contribution, how really beautiful they are. And then from that place, we can chant words. I'm just going to chant this for you. It is from Song of Songs. And in Sefer Maavor Yabbok, they have an aspect, Rosho Ketempaz, for men. And so part of what I'm doing when I write the books, and the book that I'm writing or that I put out, is I do a version for men, and then I feminize it for women, because Hebrew just is a very gender-specific language, and it's very common, most common, for women to pray in the masculine, because that's how the texts were written. So part of the work that I do is to, you know what? Rasha, to use language and use grammar for a woman is really important. I wouldn't talk to God. I wouldn't talk to you like a man. So much less would I want to talk to God as a man, because I'm not a man. And if people identify differently, just to drop that in, this isn't the final, there's a lot more work that can be done to be more and more gender inclusive. And this is the piece that I've taken on.
Tamima, before you chant this beautiful chant, I want to mention Beit Torah-tah, Toratah, is, I was working with an artist who's working with a scholar to translate in the feminine the entire Bible. So Adam is feminized and Eve is a man. I mean, it's all changed. Joseph is a woman and Pharaoh is a woman. It's really taking this to even another level to figure out what it would be like if all the genders were reversed, not just to speak as a woman, but what if the whole Bible were written in reverse?
That must feel really interesting. It like shifts everything. And I've seen other texts try to do this, but what they didn't do in the other texts is they didn't start with the head. Sefer Maavor Yabbok is really clear about the importance of the hair on the head. Rosho Ketempaz, that means his head is like beautiful gold, but it starts with the head. So just and different people will have different aspects. The head, though, is starting with the head and moving down the body is key. And you can imagine washing someone lovingly while reading this. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, and the braided locks of your head are like royal purple. A king is held captive in its tresses. How beautiful and pleasant you are, a love with delights. Your stature is like a palm tree, and your breasts like clusters of dates. I said, I will climb up the palm tree and grab onto its branches, and let your breasts be like clusters of the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and your palate is like the best wine, flowing smoothly to my beloved, making the lips of the sleeping speak. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. It's like seeing the most beautiful. And at this tender time, it just feels very real. It just is real. It's just what is.
Sometimes what happens is we have very few people, or I might even be alone in some very unusual circumstances. At that time, I can't look at a book and I can't be reading. And so it has happened actually yesterday. I was looking at a meta on the table, a woman who had died, not from this community. I mean, wider community, but not from this congregation. And I knew her, and I said, as I was washing, may these eyes that have viewed the world be blessed. May this mouth that spoke beautiful words be blessed. May this shoulder that had burdens be blessed. May this arm that held and hugged be blessed. And I went like that throughout the whole body.
Beautiful. Real. Yeah, there's usually to do a ritual, at least 3 people, I think. You need 2 people at least to work with the body. The third person might, and 1 person to work with the text. So it's I think 3, and 3 is not too many. I think 4 is better. So also when we wash, we can also hold it as the tree of life. So the right side, I mean, this is actually in Sefer Maavor Yabbok, but it's also the tree of life. So like the right side being the side of grace, chesed. So we marry that, and we mirror that, and like when you wash that, you can hold the intention of chesed, the grace that this person had done. The left side, the boundaries, the healthy discipline, and you kind of reflect on that, the balance. Being able to stay this tiferet, stay the course with netzach, and the different attributes. Hud, being a holy surfer, being able to ride the wave and be adaptable as needed. Look at that, grows with great babies, that person, and grandbabies. Yesod, there are lots of ways to do that. And just to really, but to hold it that way and to see the beauty and to really amplify that in your heart, and in so doing, it amplifies it to the divine heart. And then I mentioned yesterday or on Sunday about the hair, because I think it's so gorgeous. That's why it's like so important to wash the hair. And then we talked about the kadosh, 410 threads from the top of the head, from each root of the hair, the kadosh. And then another kadosh for 410 different vehicles that attach on high, and from that the 720 that go to the 20 to the upper 3 sefirot, these being the upper 3, and 700 going to the lower 7 sefirot. And I think of Avatar. It's a Jewish version where we're connected to this creator of all, each individually. And like we have a lot of hairs on our head, right? So each individually and deeply in a very specific way. And it's to imagine that or to see that in my mind's eye makes me feel connected. It brings comfort. I guess at first I had to suspend my disbelief the first time I heard it, and now it's like, let's just visualize it and bring the energy in, the blessing in that we can. Then we move to the Taharah itself. And there are lots of customs ways of doing this. Some people will pour the water, usually 3 times top to bottom continuously, and say Taharah he, or Taharhu. She is pure, he is pure. And I've seen that, and I was really surprised not to find that at all in Sefer Maavor Yabbok. I'm looking all over for it. This is what we do. Why is it not in here? But it wasn't in here. So I'm going to share some of the verses with you that are. But also I want to take a moment and pause and think about the transformational qualities of water. Right? Water spreads. Water fits any container exactly. I mean, that's really grace. Water is the model of chesed, model of grace. It spreads, it connects as much as it's allowed to, and it meets any container exactly. Water is really gives the possibility of life. When scientists look for life on other planets, the first thing they do, they can really divvy it down to a small amount of planets in different solar systems in different locations. because what's required to have life as we know it is water to be liquid, to have water at a temperature where it can spread and where it can sprout life. So that's number one vehicle for method for looking for life in other planets. And not only that, we've all seen, pictures of like a little tiny pink flower or whatever color flower on a dry desert floor. And this little flower has gone to so much trouble, and there's evolution involved to be able to get that little drop of water that's going to give them the possibility of life itself. So it's amazing stuff. And not only that, but water is also receptive to gravitational fields outside of Earth. We all know the waves in the ocean are a product in large part of the moon's, Shekhinah's, gravitational pull. And so the waves, so water responds to the tug from other planets. So it's really kind of a space communicator, if you will, because we can see the waves, and we know that that's just what we can see, and there's a lot more beyond that. We know a lot of people know about astrology, the constellations, how they impact the light and the presence and the gravity and the planets. All have impact, and they also impact our water. So that's when we do a mikveh, right? That's when we're doing the transformation of being reborn, which is what's happening with Taharah. Water is also the magic ingredient that does the transformation. If I get a bruise or a cut, I'm going to put water on it and rub it to make it, to make it get better, to clean it up, to make it change in a way that's more acceptable. So water, let's not underestimate the power and the potency and the importance of water that we're blessed to have in abundance. May it continue. So the first part of the liturgy says, and it's draws from Song of Songs, and it's here really to talk to the water. You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, a rill of Lebanon. So like giving potency to the water. Then the next, and this is why you're starting to trickle water on the top part of the meta or the mate. When Havaya has washed away the filth of it's actually when Adonai. This is one of the times where they actually use the word Adonai, Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud. So when Adonai has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and the innards of Jerusalem have been wrung out through the spirit of justice and spirit of release. So we're calling in the purification aspects of water. And these are just the first two as we're beginning to pour on the top. And here it goes on when you're doing the completion of the pour, like from like the lower part on down. Yisrael, the word Yisrael's mikvah. This is such a potent word. And so the writer of Sefer Maavor Yabbok had really assumed that people knew a lot of Torah, because it really is. It's a reference. It's from Jeremiah, but it's also mentioned in Talmud Yoma, which is all about Yom Kippur. And so they say that Yisrael on Yom Kippur, that's when Yisrael is the Holy One of Blessing, Yud He Vav He, Havaya is Yisrael's mikvah. That's from Mishnah Yom Kippur. So that means that on Yom Kippur, all there is God, and so we are all, whether we choose to be or whether we want to be, whether we know it or not, there is an automatic immersion in the God field. So with that, Yisrael's mikvah, which is the Holy One of Blessing, rescues us at times of distress. Why be a stranger on earth, like a visitor turned away from lodging? You shall be holy, for I am holy. No weapon that is formed against you shall succeed, and every tongue that shall rise against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of Havaya's servants, and their due reward is from me, Havaya said. So protection, and God's here, and it's kind of a play on words because you're doing the mikveh for the deceased, but God is here. Yisrael is a mikveh, and we call in on that Yom Kippur liturgy memory to for the purity, for the purification of it. And we've been practicing this every year, once a year. And so now we get to really immerse into the real mikveh of Yisrael. Any thoughts or questions?
I have never heard of the word Havaya before. Never heard that word. Is that another name of Hashem?
So it's the name that I've been using and a lot of people have been using for Yud He Vav He, since actually it's classically used in Hasidic texts. Havaya, it's got the same letters as Yud He Vav He, and I like it because it means life force, like the life, the enlivener. It got that isness, that like the iser, the presence that's here, and it's been really good for me lately, and I hope it resonates for you. I think God language is really important, and it's also really personal. So Havaya has been what I've been using. What I like also about using Havaya, it's like a lot of times you'll see Adonai used for Havaya, and then there are times when the word Adonai, like we saw on the earlier slide, is actually used, but nobody knows that it's really the Adonai, that's the Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, because we think that it's always Yud, He, Vav, He. And from that perspective, it's lost, and that's also, and the energy is really different for Adonai, which means my Lord, as opposed to Yud, He, Vav, He, which is life force. Carrying the body. Also, when I look at the pictures, and I look at them differently after hearing Rabbi Elisha, the way she's looking at them, just saying. But what you can see here, it looks like they're carrying them, but it also looks like they could almost be passing him. I mean, there's a close line. There's a certain intimacy in the way the people are standing.
You can see that they're giving tzedakah even while they're mourning.
On the way to the cemetery. So giving tzedakah is a big piece of this. It's a way to ask for mercy, for the compassion, that this person, that the deceased be, to advocate on their behalf, if you will, by giving gifts and coins to people in need.
Right, and we do it because the departed soul doesn't have a body to do the mitzvahs anymore. So we do the mitzvahs and we bring in their name so that they should merit by our doing these mitzvahs, these commandments, this help for the community here on earth, because they can't do it for themselves anymore. So it's like saying Kaddish, it's one of the things we do to help the soul that can't articulate words anymore.
Yeah, and in that vein, there's a wonderful Torah. It's like looking for mitzvahs that people do. People can do mitzvahs after they're dead in this way, because if you do a mitzvah for somebody that's deceased, it goes to their credit. And so they say the Book of Mitzvahs. It's like the people that for the living, and the book at the end, the Book of Mitzvahs are the people that are passed, but the people that have passed can still do mitzvahs and have merit for that. And it's just good to do mitzvahs. It's good to help. And it's meaningful to say, okay, this one's for you, Mom. Or whoever your beloved is.
So it looks like they're using a washing cup as the container for the donations. Is that significant?
I don't think so. It looks like a washing cup. It could be, but I don't know. I think anything you put it in would be okay. And then when the body is placed someplace else, so I've done this, but you pick up the body and you move it and you place the body someplace else. There's a prayer, which is the same prayer for taking the Torah out, very similar. Vayhi bin soa ha'aron, when you carry the aron, you carry the person out, and then place them in a different location. There needs to be movement. And then, and everything is optional in end of life. A way to elevate and honor someone that's been recently deceased before burial is to do 7 circles around them. Just like we do 7 circles under a chuppah, or similar to the way we do 7 circles under a chuppah, similar to 7 circles on Simchas Torah. And these are times that are joyous moments, and like usually good moments, happy moments. And so it's very meaningful in that vein to do circles. You bring that happy moment. It's like a chilula. It's like the wedding to God, to elevate, the happening and the service. The other thing I will add is that there is a practice. My personal practice I will share is chanting the Ana B'choach every day, and I do 1 circle for each line. And it was something that I was led to do by a mashpia, one of my spiritual directors, many, many years ago. And it was just, okay, walk 7 circles. I'm like, okay. So I just would do it, part of my davening practice. The next thing I knew, I was saying the Ana B'choach with it. It was just natural. And then that was around, I've been doing this for more than 20 years, but about 10 years ago, I saw a Kabbalistic Siddur that says, oh, it's good to walk circles as you do the Ana B'choach. Yeah, I got the sense of it. And then I found this practice of it uses the same divine name as the Ana B'choach, but the liturgy is a little bit more complicated. But it is the same name, so it's got a lot of the same resonance, just amplified, if you will.
I have to tell everybody that I've observed, I was there with Tamima when we were praying the morning prayer in her beautiful home and walking circles and chanting Ana B'choach. It was just so beautiful. And it was almost like not doing 7 circles, but 7 spirals. And I got to say, Rabbi Tamima is very much into spirals in movement and in nature. And this really struck me when you were praying that, and I was following you around the room. It was beautiful.
That was so long ago. I'm so glad we got to do that. And this was inspiring. So really the book that I put out, it's about this practice and the Kabbalah to understand it, which goes beyond this practice. Accompanying the deceased. So that's the Levayah, the accompanying word to the final resting place. So there are 8 people carrying it, so no one has to worry too much. Look at the heels on these men. So interesting. I also like how it shows a certain style, like in the picture from The Hague that was on the Hakafot, and the moments. There's a certain, I don't know, she said it's old. And burial, Adam going back to Adamah. Now, the men, the ones with in our pictures, there would be women here too, of course. And also, one of the parts that I think is so meaningful is, the hole is usually dug by somebody at the cemetery, a mortuary. I'm sorry, the cemetery staff would do that, but it's really comforting to put the dirt on top to really complete the process and to really have a hand in completing it. It helps us understand what is happening and the gravity, of the situation and the completeness, right? And then until that happens, the person is in Aninut. We went through the stages the other day. So it's really useful to minimize the time between death and burial for a few reasons. It's like the people, the family, the mourners are kind of floating usually until this physical grounding. Another reason for keeping it short is it's better not to need refrigeration or to minimize refrigeration if that's what's going on. And if you don't want that, if you want to do a quick burial and avoid refrigeration, that's something that would have to be worked out with the local funeral home to support that. I know Reb Zalman was able to do that. He did Taharah even before he died. He just wanted to see what it was like. God bless him. What an example. Right, and the other aspect, that's another reason that's it's like it all supports, each step supports the other, is if you're having shmira, which you really want to keep someone with the neshama, or have people from the community be present, or tune in long distance if there's a reason not to be present, like COVID. It's not that long a period of time. Like a lot of people on the funeral, like people that I work with at Kavod V'Nichum, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg of blessed memory, when she passed away, she had a national funeral, and it was like, so she was like out for like 7 days to go through all that, and like a lot of people were, well, it was a long shmira, and it was like a virtual shmira that people signed up to do and participate in, and it was very long. So that's a consideration. It's just cleaner and less to organize, and simpler if it's shorter.
So we had the funeral and burial for Abba Kasten of blessed memory, who was a member here just the other day, and there was a finality when those present shoveled the earth on the casket. The first shovel is with the shovel turned over, showing that we're not doing this willingly or happily, that we're hesitant and we're sorry that we have to be doing this. But then the other two shovels full are with the shovel turned the correct way, and there's this thud that happens when it hits the wood of the plain pine box. It's like reality hits. My goodness, the person is really gone, and I could see it in the people present that it was like, now it's real.
Rabbi, would it be appropriate to share what we did for Joe Nauer's funeral?
Well, in some cases, you can't get to the actual site of the burial, like in the veterans cemetery down in Phoenix. And so some earth was placed on top of the casket before it was wheeled away, because we wanted that moment anyway. Is that what you were referring to? We do the best we can, as Rabbi Tamima said. We do the best we can.
Life is good and not perfect.
I'm wondering about the fact that it looks like the casket doesn't appear until the burial ground, that the body was carried by itself. I mean, personally, I wonder why there's a need for a casket.
There isn't a need for
There
a
isn't.
casket. Good question. It's custom. So Reb Zalman was buried, like I said, planted. I mean, I want to be planted by a tree and compost it, but like just in a shroud. And in my opinion, and Jewishly, that's the best. And ecologically, it's the simplest. It's less to bring into the earth. Plant a tree. As far as I'm concerned. So and that's probably just the custom of what they did at the time. They carried the person, and they had that's almost like the concrete vault that we have today in a sense, because it's like with the burial site. At least, but that's okay, because that will biodegrade. So it's ecological as well.
It's a lot easier on the person carrying the body, or the people.
Yeah, right. It can get really heavy. And they also have like these wicker biers. I call it a bier. It's like a simple wicker stretcher, and the body's just like carried on that. And then from that, the body can go directly into the ground, or they can be buried on the stretcher itself.
What for children attending a funeral? Is there age or I don't know if there's anything regarding children being able to attend.
So I think in general, it's important. So that's not from Sefer Maavor Yabbok. It's from, this is Tamima talking. Just to be clear, but I think it's important to include children in end of life ritual. They have the closure, and to have an adult with them, so if they want to go away, they can go away. But the adult to really tend to the child's needs at the time and encourage them to be present, because they're going to know that, grandma is like, what happened, they're going to miss. And for them to see that and not be scared of death. And so we get more comfortable, because it's what defines life, really. Life doesn't have meaning without, it wouldn't mean anything without death. It's really two sides of the same coin, and even, and bless you, whoever sneezed.
So the reason I ask is I lost my mother when I was 8, and I was never allowed to even go to the cemetery for years after that. I was visiting family one year when I was about 15, and my cousin drove me to the cemetery. My uncle did, so that I could see where my mother was buried.
That sounds really isolating.
Yes.
I think it's easier for a child to experience death through a pet as, kind of like a precursor to having to deal with the real experience of a parent or a close relative.
It was always something that I always sort of had to wonder, was she really gone?
I hear you. I think it's important to include, people think they're being kind to children by keeping them, it's too stressful and it's too much shock, but the shock's going to happen. They're going to miss the person, and better to do it in community, with someone. And they should be able to leave if they want to leave too. That's the other piece, with someone who's going to have them do that mind meld that we talked about when you do Bikkur Cholim. You kind of surrender to the will of the Bikkur Cholim. So someone should be with the kid, the child to surrender to the will of the child in a similar way. I think that's the biggest gift like a human can give another person. It's like surrendering their will to match another person's for a time, just to allow and to empower for tender times. And there are times when it's really appropriate.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay, when I was pregnant with my first child and there was a family funeral, I wasn't allowed to go to that funeral because I was pregnant. And I never understood why.
Yeah, I think it's the same. They're trying to protect you. Did it protect you?
No. No, I thought I was missing out.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh.
It's just,
But there was no reason for that? No reason?
I can't think of one.
Me either.
I mean, unless it was hard for a pregnant woman to get to it's a far walk or it's too stressful or something physical.
No.
I think our predecessors were trying to protect. I think the protectors might be trying to protect themselves too from dealing with the emotion that's liable to come up, and in certain circumstances, if it be a child, acting out, and then everybody's all upset about the child. They want to keep it, and that's just not real. I think it's important to, have support so there's comfort for people to fall into, and create the space to allow them to express, to let them feel, to be a part of it. Otherwise, they feel left out, like you say. And it's like, is my mom really gone? What did they do? Where is she? I didn't see her. And it's just, the hiding's not it could be well intentioned, but it's not useful. And now we know better. Anita.
I had a student, and I'm sure this is more common than this one student that I had. When she was a young girl, maybe 5 or 6, her mom died. And the family did not want to tell her that her mom died. They told her, your mom went away.
Oy.
And so she would go out and sit on the front stoop every day and look up at the sky and watch the airplanes, wondering when her mom was going to come back. And this set her up for later abuse by family members. And she became suicidal. I mean, that was like the beginning of other things, sequelae that followed. And I'm sure that, there are millions of kids who are told your mom or your dad went away. And so they keep waiting for their parent to come back.
There's no finality. It's heartbreaking. Yeah.
And there are many different like therapies, if you will, or ways of one can do one's own inner work, kind of reparenting, like go back to that little child or, yourself pregnant and, give that being all the nurturing and care and understanding that they didn't get.
It's true.
Very hard to fix a lie. And if you tell the truth, you can always pick up the pieces afterwards.
Amen. Well
Lie.
said.
How long is that lie going to be there, and how long does it take?
And it keeps spreading.
Is that it's really a lie, and then the hurt that came with it.
The sense of betrayal.
Yeah. And a lot of times people, like the rabbi was saying, they're doing their best with their level of understanding to protect people, protect the fetus in the womb from, the emotional turmoil or, the young child, and
Keep the mom from stress. I feel like I'm doing a good job because I'm not letting her get stressed in this instant, but she's going to find out later.
right.
Okay, let's invite our angels in. I think they could lift us because invite them in to give us a little lift. Let's start with English. For their angels are commanded to guard you on all your ways. For their angels are commanded to guard you on all your ways. For their angels are commanded to guard you on all your ways. For God's angels are commanded to guard you on all your ways. For God's angels are commanded to guard you on all your ways. For God's angels are commanded to guard you on all your ways. For God's angels are commanded to guard you on all your ways. So
Thank you, Tamima, for being an angel for all of us as we walk on our journey of better understanding and preparation for the ultimate journey. We really appreciate it. And maybe there are additional questions. You can always write to me and I'll forward it to Rabbi Tamima, or you can reach her through holisticjew.org.
I was just wondering if anybody from this group, are you interested in more into Chaver Kadisha after hearing this, or are you feeling like you'd want to participate in, do you have a Bikkur Cholim group, or what do you, or
We have a Bikkur Cholim group, but the training that we did for Taharah, for Chaver Kadisha, was a few years ago, and I really do need a new team because most of those people are either not available or not walking the planet anymore. And I would really appreciate if anyone who took this course and is sensitive to it would let me know that you'd like to be part of a Taharah team, as we will need it again, I'm sure.
I actually did have a question as well. It seems like for the few passings that I've been present for, as soon as a person passes, it seems like someone from the mortuary or from the hospital immediately sort of comes in and takes control of the situation in terms of, and removes the body very quickly. Is there a way that the family's wishes can be honored in terms of, even if you're not doing the whole Jewish custom, the whole ceremony, that pieces of it could be honored?
Of
And
course, and
how does
especially
that happen?
communicating with the hospital, with the doctors, with the mortuary. It's like, you know what? We're not ready yet. We're going to hang out here for an hour. Go away. I mean, that's totally appropriate. You know, even more so if it's a home death. That's like, you know, you come when I'm ready for you. And yeah, and in a hospital too, it's completely appropriate to say, you know, we got stuff to do. It's like, not yet. So control it. And I think we're also intimidated, like, you know, the doctors and the death people and the professionals and you know, it's like the person, the emotion, the feelings are what's really important. And the professionals don't know. It's not even, in a way, it's your job to tell them. And so they can be accommodating. And it's our job to talk. That's why we have conversations and courses like this, so we can remind ourselves to be empowered to be part of the kinds of deaths we want to be a part of, you know, to make it go away in a way that's nourishing and real and supports, you know, kavod hamet, honors the dead and comforts the mourners, in that order. So yeah, that's so it was too fast. So that's oh, sorry, ouch.
All right, let's all give Reb Tamima some love here. Let's all take it in.
Your beautiful waving hands. Thank you. Such a privilege to be with you.